Welcome to Upstage Downstage, with him, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And him, Stephen Rees, typically seated in the cheap seat.
This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen,
Things we've liked,
and may not have liked,
giving our complete unprofessional
and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew,
Take a seat,
and let's raise that curtain. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Cluedo 2, The Next Chapter. We saw this production at Sheffield Lyceum on the 16th of May 2024. Cluedo 2, The Next Chapter was written by BAFTA Award winners Lawrence Marks and Maurice Gran and directed by Mark Bell. So Stephen, what's it all about?
Cluedo 2 is a rollicking spoof of a comedy that will keep you guessing right up to the final twist, inviting budding detectives of all ages from 8 to 80 and beyond to watch for the clues and unravel the secrets as we all try to work out who done it, with what and where.
But first, our post-show opinion!
Mrs. Y, with her slippers in her bedroom, will be more interested.
I don't care who done it.
So, with all that said, let's
Set the scene!
So the staging that was presented to us was that of a blank black canvas effect, and they had arches made up. There was two arches, one at the front which was the outline of the board game of Cluedo. So it showed you the blueprint of the manor house with the turrets, the windows, and it was like a green sort of what do you call it? An outline?
The border.
The border.
It's more like the grassed area outside the building.
Yeah, so that there was that done twice. So you had the most imposing one right at the front of the staging, which was quite larger, and then there was a smaller one at the back of the stage. And at the back of the stage in centre, you had again the replica of the floor prints for the board game Cluedo, which was on a screen, just tilted a little, but with the manor house superimposed on top of it, on top of what is like the driveway towards it, with the grass on either side and these bulbous bushes of green things going large at the bottom, up small to the top, to give some direction and depth.
Perspective.
That's the word I was looking at. And that's how it was to start with.
And in a way, it was quite confident in the way you knew exactly what sort of production you were coming from. It was on brand with the Cluedo theming, and it was well made. There was a few things where we noticed where the actual perimeter board edging didn't actually meet each other at the top corners, which was a little bit off-putting.
But then we assume that that's because if it's to transfer into a larger stage, there might be an extra additional piece of boarding there that will fit in.
Yeah, but other than that, it was strong, as in you knew what you were coming to see.
Yeah, overall appearance on this one, to start with, for me, I felt this was a little lackluster compared to the original Cluedo that we saw and commented on in the early days.
Yeah.
I thought this looks slightly cheap
and
in design, like a reduced budget.
I mean, at first I was expecting, when you saw it, I thought, oh, it's quite a confident piece. They're giving you the exterior of the building, and that's going to disappear, and you're going to get when you see a black stage, you expect almost things that are going to give you those set pieces and moments from that. But some, as we'll discuss sort of through this, some of the set pieces never moved. So sometimes less is more. So take that away and put something else in its place to actually take you to another space on stage, rather than leave it in the back because it's a good piece of scenery.
Okay. So let's actually run through the pieces that came onto the stage for each individual scenes, because we probably can't remember them.
Each room,
what we
basically.
can, what we could remember. So the pieces were, the hallway. They rolled a door onto set, and there was a window that came down from off a
from a tab above.
From a tab above. I think it had a blind, didn't it? As
well,
it did. Had a blind. But no walls underneath either. You could see people walking through. So it was very just something there for the sake of
it was a set piece just
representing.
to represent,
Just represent
scene.
it.
But then the confusing bit was because they didn't remove the house at the back, you were looking at a door, looking at the house with the house in the shadow in the background, and it was a little bit like, take it away. It would have been more striking if they'd have only brought that in for certain scenes, because throughout the production you started seeing the study, the library, the dining room, and the billiard room. You started seeing all those scenes. You didn't need to keep seeing the house and the map at the back, really. And I think that's what started to get a bit annoying, really, because it's like you don't need to leave that on there all the time for people to know that we're in a different space.
Yeah. So the hallway was basically just a front door with a window.
Yeah.
And then, so the kitchen, when that occurred, it was just a push on, like work surface and a fridge.
Yeah,
wasn't
exactly.
It?
Yeah.
That came on for those particular scenes. The billiard room, that was slightly different because they had just a gimmicky pool table that they brought on for that.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite good, but then anyway, we'll talk
I
about that later.
think as well, for me, if they wanted to go there with this set, if that house opened up into like a doll's house and they had mini lights in those rooms, as you went round the building.
Well, I was going to compare this to the original Cluedo, but just describe all the sets, all the scenes in this one. So there was the study, which was the guy's recording.
Yeah, recording studio.
Thing. So that was like a desk with a recording tape on it, and then a seat on the other side. So they came in together. What are the other rooms?
It was the dining room, and then there was the.
So that was that just a large table? Yes,
that was just a large. Yeah, just a large table.
Another large table on that one.
And then there was the lounge.
The lounge.
The chaise longue and the
chaise longue.
And it was
that's right. Yeah. Oh, and the library with the steps up onto the
and it was actual bookcases.
Yeah. So for me, those particular set pieces that they brought into the space didn't exactly like thrill me either. You know, they seemed to just be a bit disjarring with the whole.
So the only one for me was the library. Actually looked like it gave you the nod to a library.
Yeah, it was the only one that was
than the others
decent
in a way.
But that was only sort of like a small section of it. Not that you expect anything bigger, but
no,
it just with everything else around it, like the darkness or all the things on.
I think because there was no backboards behind each of the rooms, you'd still got the vision of the outdoor space with the house and the trees and the map in the background every time. So it just became a bit like, we're just leaving that up because we're lazy. Because to be honest, it'd have been better off just having nothing behind, because then your eyes would have been drawn to the set pieces rather than seeing a bit of stuff being left there for.
And also there was the desk, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was the desk.
That was in the library, I think.
Yeah.
And now we've described what we saw in each of those rooms. Now, if we just compare it to the first Cluedo, which was made by the same, done by the same director, I feel slightly guilty for slating the first Cluedo that we went to see a little bit. Although I think I do remember praising the set because I thought it was a great set.
Yeah, we praised the set.
Now, why couldn't we have just had that set repurposed again? Because that was a brilliant set, that was.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this is meant to be set in 1968. And it was, I'll be honest, apart from the recording studio, I struggled to see the elements of the 60s and the late 60s.
Well, there was Professor Plum, who didn't look like a professor at all, looked more like a 60s hobo.
Yeah.
A very unobvious person who's been to a fancy dress shop.
But I feel like the set pieces were just things that were found to fit in the house rather than anything being sort of an iconic. I don't know. I think it's down to the record. The whole idea of the 60s was because they were recording a track, and it was of that time of what was Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and stuff like that. Was that really needed?
for the plot, really.
I just think it just confused. I think if you set it in such a specific time period, everything's got to be around that, and I think it just didn't. It didn't have the strength of the time period. That's all. I think there was a lot of things thrown at this to actually that it lost its way a little compared to the previous one was in its period, and I think that's the difference, regardless of what the actors were or weren't doing, or how we talked about.
Yeah, and the original one
performance of it,
represented within the actual Cluedo world with the characters as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This second one, yes, they were trying to come up with a different storyline, but they removed the characters a bit too far from, like, the Miss Scarlet and Miss Peacock, Professor Plum, Colonel Mustard.
Yeah.
Is it Colonel Mustard?
Yeah, Colonel Mustard.
That's all right then. I was thinking of the actual Mustard.
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
I think I got it wrong. Yeah, because we had some. Oh, is the accent? Oh, yeah. We can talk about that in the acting.
We'll talk about that next.
But my God, the whole setup of this one.
I think
I didn't enjoy this one at all.
I think for me it's the elements of. I was confused about the time period because you didn't feel like the whole package was set in one era.
I think it's because also the stately home represented an old home with 60 people in there. I think it would have been unique had they have spun it where it was like a 60s mansion. All the rooms were dressed up in 60s furniture, 60s room. Like, it didn't necessarily need to be in that manor house if they were going to take it away.
And it could have been really almost out of this world 60s where nobody would ever have that in that house. But we're talking really rich people. Yeah, we're talking really rich people. We're talking, you almost want that complete departure from Cluedo for the characters to still be seen in those, going through those moments, but just in a completely different space. And I think that would have had...
Well, they did mention about there being a swimming pool underneath the billiard room because they'd done it over. But why even go to that? Why not just have a swimming pool in it and just say, oh, that's a swimming pool?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've changed some of it.
Yeah, like it's almost like when you buy a different version of Monopoly where you've got different streets or like different names.
It's not the study, but it's a recording studio.
Yeah, exactly.
They could have changed some of the names.
Yeah.
And made it suit what it was trying to be.
For me, it's like
even though I've just said that they've changed the characters, it was sort of like stuck in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for me, it's like you think about something like Abigail's Party that's set in somebody's front room in a fixed 70s time period. You know it's the 70s.
Yeah.
Like everything about it. This just felt confused. It just felt like we're wanting to put it in a new time period, but we're not quite sure that we want to do everything because we want to keep it linked to the past. And all it felt was, it's like, where are we? There wasn't enough 60s references to feel like we're stuck in that era.
Yeah. So why don't we just talk about the writing of this as we're sort of venturing that way then? Written by Lawrence Marks and Maurice Gran. So they're Birds of a Feather writers. The Good Night, Sweetheart. Well known in the industry, put it that way. And I must admit, their humour or the jokes that were created, I didn't find them funny at all. I felt that they were struggling to be funny.
It was tired.
Or old. It was very tired. Like, it wasn't relatable. It wasn't of the. Even if they were writing in the era, it still wasn't funny.
No, not at all.
So it was quite tedious, I'd say.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, is it just me that I'm not laughing? But it was very obvious that it wasn't just us in the room.
Yeah, a lot of the audience just. Yeah, because I think there was a moment where Mrs. White had there was a bit of a chaos sorting out the dining room scene, so they were putting everyone in the seats and filling stuff up with wine, and then she sort of did a little chaotic bit, and then she put her hand on her hip and she looked out to the audience because she'd just stopped. Now, it was a moment where I think they assumed they would get a round of applause.
Yeah.
And they never did.
No.
Because it was boring. And
yeah,
it's like,
and I think...
but you want us to react to this, and we're sort of bored. It wasn't entertaining at all. I don't know what it was.
There was no... I'll get my words out now.
We'll see the struggle.
I know.
Not just with you, but in the play itself.
The thing is, this is a production that should live up to the realms of like good comedies or panto or slapstick. If you're going to go there with this is not a murder mystery where it's serious. We need to try and work out who it is and this, that, and the other.
It's a feel-good show, isn't it?
It's meant to be a feel-good, funny, sort
light
of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, have a bit of fun, bit of happiness, and I felt like there wasn't that. There was some glimmers in there, but there wasn't enough to make it a standout, memorable production.
I think the setup for me, trying to explain everything, just dragged a little too long.
Yeah.
Like I felt the first half was very much set up, and then it was like, well, I'm just sort of like waiting for the payoff.
When we talk about writing as well, I don't think some of the characters had developed enough as an individual.
But we felt this last time round.
Yeah.
When they were portrayed. Like I think we picked up on some of the actors, the famous actors.
Yeah, exactly.
Picking up the costumes and just
thinking that by wearing that colour you're going to stand out. You know?
And I think we had issues last time where Professor Plum and Colonel Mustard or Reverend Green didn't particularly do much.
No.
Whereas the same kind of thing happened in this one, where Professor Plum, for example, just wore a caricature sort of fancy dress from a joke shop of the 60s.
Yeah.
And it just looked really nasty and cheap. And what was his point?
But also script-wise, he didn't really have a lot to do.
No, there was nothing really. He might have had a couple of throwaway lines of his purpose of being there.
And the whole point of Cluedo, the whole point of murder mysteries, everybody's a potential suspect. So you've got to almost build a bit of an edge all the way through to like, could it be them? But it just felt a bit like, oh, well, we know he's not going to get affected because all he's doing is dipping round the peripheral rather than being in the middle.
But also the butler.
Yeah.
He wasn't a butler, but he was an actor coming for a role in the advertisement thing that they were going to record to push the record sales or some. It was along them lines of advertisement anyway.
It just became complicated where it wasn't funny. You know, it was like there was the twists were not funny enough to be, I think it's that classic thing of trying to make it, are we a serious murder mystery? Or are we doing the mousetrap with comedy? I just think it got lost in what it wanted to be, in a way, from the writing side.
Yeah, and
there was a lot of ideas thrown in the mix and kept in, maybe, than actually needed to be.
It's weird because I feel slightly contradictory. In one part, it was too much information, and then in some parts, it wasn't. So the plot, it was heavily plotted and researched in terms of them changing it into the 60s to be recording studio and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then the characters felt a little undercooked and a little underdeveloped when it's sort of them as well. And the whole whodunit, it felt like there was beats missed out.
Well, it was
that
like
meant something.
It was like the hidden recordings and things like that. I mean, I'm not really giving much of the plot away in a way, because there was no real build up to that. It was like, oh, we've got hidden recordings hidden in the speaker and this, that, and the other, and it was just a bit like, where's this come from? It just felt too. It just didn't have the pace in the writing. I don't think that it could have had. I just think it was lackluster in that way.
And is this the play where they were hiding the bodies up the chimney as well?
Yeah, we hid the body up the chimney, yeah.
Because it just reminded me of, there was one scene in 39 Steps where there was a chimney as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one was which.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is the one where they hid his body up the chimney.
Up the chimney, didn't they?
Yeah.
And also, I suppose this is a directorial thing, which we can probably talk about now. Is after certain beats, all the actors sort of like looked out into the audience from around the sides.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sighing because okay.
But for that to be fully in the know and for it to mean something, you've got to have a belly full of laughs first.
Yeah, you have.
But it was just dead. The whole atmosphere just felt lackluster and dead.
I think that was the other side of it, where if you're going to break the wall, you break the wall. If you don't. And I think that was the key thing. It's like you couldn't actually work out whether it was the audience they were looking at. And then I always say the less is more sometimes. You don't need to break that wall too much. And if you do it too much, that's what you get. You get people going, what are you looking at us for? Because there's nothing funny for you to look at us for, or, it's like the moment.
It's like looking out for approval, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it actually becomes almost prima donna-ish if you get it wrong, because it's almost like, I've just made a funny joke, so you will laugh. I'm going to look at you until you laugh, and it's a bit like,
this is clever, isn't it?
But then it goes, no, this is actually awkward, because we're not actually laughing with you. It's getting a little bit
cringy.
Silly. Yeah.
For me, the directing I just felt was it wasn't very imaginative, and I do wonder if it's because of the constraints of not really having a full set,
and there's
having set pieces.
Yeah, and there was a lot of semicircles and lines.
Oh, and another thing which I absolutely couldn't stand. I mean, yes, it was funny. There was a couple of things funny, ironically enough, because we didn't particularly find this funny at all. The bit with the picture frames when they were walking past, and say there was like 4 characters there. They all had empty picture frames in front of their faces, and somebody was walking past, looking at them as if they were static pieces. And then one by one, once they'd gone past 3 of them, those 3 would then go back around to create like a longer walkway. That's okay for the first time, but then it seemed to have been done continually all the time, and then you get different pictures going.
And then I made a comment, the ones boring. Where they actually got pictures in them. We were walking down another corridor and they used the same pictures. They'd not double-sided the frames. If they'd have double-sided the frames, you could have got away with having 2 different pictures on 2 different corridors for the same person. It's just that we had the same pictures going up the same corridor. So it was getting a bit like, are they on the same corridor? Are we walking up the front of the building? And then because you'd still got the house in the background, you're like, oh, we're outside? Because I'm starting to get a little bit like, are we in the garden? Because that house is still visible.
They did bring a garden bit of furniture, didn't they?
Yeah, at one
potted
point.
plants and something else.
Yeah, that was like the
really
garden
got used,
room.
and they were talking about stuff.
Another conservatory.
Yeah, I forgot about that. It's because they never really
But
did
they
anything.
used a conservatory once, and then they turned the fridge round, and there was another conservatory scene on the back of the fridge. But it just all became
meh. And another scene that I was talking about, it was quite funny where to portray the billiard room, they had this green cloth of like a snooker table. Well, it was a billiard table.
Yeah.
And they had the cues. Well, they had the balls on the cues. So when one of the characters potted it, they physically moved the balls around. And oh, look, they went into the pockets. That was funny. And it started off great. Yeah. And then they did that 2 or 3 more times, didn't they?
Yeah, it was too much.
And it was, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
1 was enough. 2, if they'd have done it in the second half on a different, bigger scale.
Or if they'd have done it rushed, or they all got to do it and then throw it away, end off.
But it felt like they were using these scenes as padding scenes just to extend something. And you'd understand it if they were changing the scenery behind the tabs.
Yeah, but they didn't.
But nothing happened. It was just them moving from part to part.
It's basically doing running around the building scene, and it just...
That's when it becomes boring, because they're not advancing the plot. Nothing's really happening. They're just running around corridors.
Yeah, exactly.
Or running around on stage, and it's like, oh, I'm just really bored of this now. Get me out of here.
Yeah, I think there was a few times where they overused things where it was like, it's like the bear costume. It was on at the start. We knew that's going to end up with somebody in it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exciting because it was left there for a while. It just became, oh, here we go, there's going to be a bear that moves.
Yes, and there was a scene when the I say Reverend Inspector, but he wasn't. It was Al Green.
Yeah.
No, not. I don't mean like Reverend Inspector. I mean he was Reverend Green.
Yeah.
But they called him Al Green, not the singer. But he was a military guy, so he comes in and he's looking at this other guy, who was white, and the Reverend was black. Al Green was black. But there was another guy who put his hands behind him, who had black hands as well. And when it was like, and they had hands up, and there wasn't even that joke of you've got different coloured hands. Do you know what I mean? To your complexion. So there was like certain little bits missed there that could have been played upon.
Yeah, like misdirects that. I don't
Yeah, or even had the bear done that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or the bear put his hands up as well to add a bit of humour. But there's the whole pacing of this, the writing of this just felt a little, like you say, tired. The direction felt a little tired as well. And the bit where they brought the table on, that I've already said, they did that on the first Cluedo.
Exactly.
And that was great. That was fun and that was slapstick.
Yeah.
Whereas this one seemed to be a bit more...
I think it just
grating.
wasn't dynamic enough. I think it was relying on the Cluedo brand almost.
And Lawrence and the writers.
Yeah, and the writers. But I think it's very easy to rely on a brand to sell a ticket, but then the content needs to be equally as good. Because it would be, I'd love to see a great version of this. I'd love to see a really good, funny... Midsummer Murders does better. And that's saying, they write some good daytime comedic murder mysteries, and this didn't even live up to that, and I think it's really difficult because I don't really know what more to say about it.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, we're here for the drama.
I mean, for me, I'd shout out Mrs. White, Dawn Buckland. She was almost the glue of the production.
She was, wasn't she? She's one that held it all together and gave a strong performance.
And she was everything you expected out of the house.
And out of the character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as Mrs. White.
Yeah. And in a way,
very
I'd
sarcastic.
say a better character for Mrs. White than the previous production. And I don't want to compare the two, but there was more strength in her performance through... She got it right when she nudged and winked the audience more so than anybody else.
Well, the other Mrs. White ended up being like a church lady, like she was something from the WI committee. But they had a cook, didn't they? They actually had a cook in the first Cluedo, which should be Mrs. White.
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, say should.
No, but
should
it's a good way to. It was
In the movie, it wasn't, but in the board game, it is.
Yeah, and I mean, Dawn Buckland, she was great, as in she held it all together, and she was funny, and her timing was great, and I just feel like she may be doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the production, really, sometimes, where her remarks or her glances or her... She broke the wall by looking at the audience, but you knew she was doing it for a nudge, nudge, wink, wink moment. It's just a shame that a lot of others didn't go with that and play up in that way, I feel.
I don't know, because we said about them playing to the audience a bit too much. But like I said, when she did that table scene, she didn't get much of a rapturous applause from that, exactly. But we were more so laughing at her lines and her delivery.
Yeah.
I think it's because she had someone she had a character we could relate to.
Yeah.
Jason Durr playing Colonel Mustard, he gave a great performance as well. However, it was that character with it being American, so we've got all sorts of accents going on.
Yeah, this is
okay. So that was quite jarring. We also had Hannah Boyce as Mrs. Peacock. Now, she was quite affluent in her how she acted. I felt she was excellent as well. But then she ended up being revealed to be Scottish.
Yeah, exactly.
So then there was another accent going on there.
Yeah.
And then you had Ellie Leach as Miss Scarlet, who was putting on an accent. And then she was playing an affluent person once the accent had gone.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of accents going on here, and
There
it
was
just
just
seemed to be a bit of a disconnect all through.
And I think this is where you then start to struggle as to where's this set? What's it based on? We're just trying to tick every accent and every this, that, and the other box to cover all walks of life, which is, it becomes confusing because you're like, but where are you all from?
Well, Gabriel Paul, who played Reverend Green, or Al Green, I felt he was quite strong as a performance as well. You know, he was playing it like the straight man in a way.
I think
but
for me,
what I
mean is you couldn't see their relations together as a whole. It's like I look at something like The Mousetrap, and even though they all enter as people staying in the guest house, you get an element of them all being one, and their characters are different, but they're just not over the top in the sense of you still know which one's which, but they still have some sort of common crossover where you can pull it all together. And I know I've talked previously in this episode about being outlandish and this, that, and the other. I think, but the problem is if you have too many voices from too many different places, it just gets.
Well, it's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And that's why I was saying there's a lot of like forgettableness going on because you just.
It's like Professor
too
Plum.
much. I know.
Just there.
He's just there. I mean, he could have been so much more. Not just a Professor Plum, but a professor of what?
Exactly. It wasn't far enough. You didn't find out enough about the characters, or in their momentary monologues or whatever they were saying, they didn't come out with enough for you to go, oh, that's such a person. Or you've got to be able to relate to people in walks of life by how they are or who they are. And I think that there's some moments where you just thought, like Miss Scarlet, she's just wearing the red 60s dress with the white earrings to be in the 60s.
Yeah.
They didn't really get any sort of moments of that being steeped in the 60s, really. It was.
I think that's said for the whole production, actually. It was just set pieces. It was just period pieces and just like just snippets of things just to remind you of the time period. However,
that doesn't put it in the time period.
No, but because they spend an awful lot of time doing the whole running up and down corridors and doing these silly little things just to pad it out into a 2-act thing, because they did it in the first Cluedo as well. That's not.
Yeah, there was some padding.
You know, they did it there. You know, they could have used that time to input some character bits.
Yeah.
You know, you could go to town like, where's Mr. White?
Yeah, exactly.
Or where's Mr. Peacock? And what's happened previously? You could have given a bit more dimension
like the
there.
Little, they didn't. I don't think they went far enough for the like behind the scenes affairs and stuff where it actually gives motive to actually murder somebody, or you know, there's. I didn't feel like they dwelled enough on those moments of two people being alone, which then with somebody listening in the background or somebody being seen in a window catching them out.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it just moved on to the next scene before you got any sense of going, oh, that could have happened, or it could be that couple, it could be that person, it could be this. It just felt like, oh, we'll just move on to the next thing and then we'll find a knife in somebody, and then, you know, it just didn't have the momentum it needed to be raucous and funny. Because that, and the thing is, you can make something like this really funny if you spend the time on the, you know,
yeah, because the first one was funny.
It was. Yeah, even with the padding, the first one.
Yeah,
was funny.
the second one was just very forced, very tired, and
I just think it was confused in its time, space, and you know, place. Really, I think that's the.
I dare say, I mean, this was coming very close to up and leaving by the interval. When we did have the interval, it was like, what the hell is this? Come on now.
And as much as I could have left, but I thought I've got to watch the car crash to the end.
Yeah. Well, we do specifically for you guys. You know, the one viewer we do have.
We have more than one.
What? Okay, 2. The other one's my mother. What do you think overall of the props and the costumes that we used? Because I think the stereotypical props were used accordingly. You know, the rope and the dagger and the gun and all that.
I mean, one thing I would say is, the the strangling scene in the library was probably the most lacklustre strangling scene I've seen, where Colonel Mustard's holding the rope round his neck, but it wasn't very tight, and it didn't give you the impression that it was actually doing anything, which is fine if it's meant to just look like he's not doing anything bad, but actually it's the only real death scene that's visual, and it just looked a bit throwaway because it was him holding a piece of rope round his neck rather than it actually looking a bit more authentic. But that's, but prop use, I mean, they had all the props. The legs dangling down in the fireplace weren't good enough in my eyes because it didn't give enough away. And some of the positioning of the set pieces was a bit off, because when you got a policeman looking at the fireplace, that actually wasn't on enough of an angle, so he's looking across stage and he couldn't have seen the fireplace from where his eyes were. And
that was Liam Horrigan playing that, and he played multiple roles, and he was really good at all of them.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, what the tech is this?
Right then, Richard, illuminate us with your intelligence.
Well, it was a general covered lit set, really. I mean, they had a multicoloured cyc on the back that actually changed the colour of the house and the board game. But other than that, they had a mirror ball for the dining room, or the ballroom. When I say a mirror ball, it wasn't a big mirror ball, and it didn't really have much of an effect.
More of a golf ball.
If you're going to do it, yeah. Yeah, it was more of a golf ball with a few mirrors stuck on it. I just feel that it could have been... I mean, lighting-wise, it was pretty to the point. Sound-wise, sound effects were all right.
Were the gunshots to your liking this time round?
I mean, it was a gunshot. I wouldn't say
you probably
it's like
just gave
impressive.
up at this point.
I think the whole part of this production is they could have had so much more fun with it.
Well, I'm thinking each room they went in, they could have had the lighting set up specifically for those rooms and have a bit more atmosphere going on. But I don't think they did they?
No, and I think that led to the fact that we're leaving the set as it is and putting things on. If they'd have brought a tab down to hide that back wall that was maybe a white and then had different windows brought in for different rooms, even if it was the same window but comes in a different perspective, it would have gave you the impression that you were in a different space.
Yeah. And
we didn't have that. We just had the back scenes still there all the time.
Yeah.
Which I can see why they did it, but the back scene's too busy for then it to take your mind off. It distracts from what's happening in front of you.
Yeah.
I mean, technically there was, things flown in and things pushed in from the side, but there was nothing over the top that stood out, really.
I don't recall there being anything special to comment about, to be honest, with this one. I expected more. I mean, I know you can't necessarily add more, but I mean, with the audio, even the song and whatever, that seemed to have been a bit too hard for hearing. I don't mean like it was silent. I just mean it was like really horrible to listen to.
Yeah.
The track, it was just wailing. But yeah, I think I switched off, to be honest. And now it's time for
Rewind Rewatch.
Rewind Rewatch. Richard, I think for me, my Rewind Rewatch, and you'll probably agree with me on this one, was in the kitchen scene with Mrs. White, and they were having this conversation, and she kept interjecting with tarts and all sorts of like
macaroons,
cake, double entendres.
Yeah, it was full of double entendres, and for me, that's exactly the same scene I was going to say, because that was the glimmer of how good the rest of it could have been.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that scene was...
It was chaotic.
That was
fun.
The level of farce and pace that you needed through the entire production.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the thing is as well, when you bill it with linking it to things like The Play That Goes Wrong and other productions.
This literally was the play that went wrong.
But you set the ball high, you bar really high, and it didn't meet that. It's really,
Bearing in mind, it was a Thursday we went on, I still think if it's funny, it'll make you laugh, whether there's a huge audience in the crowd or just a few, because it wasn't as if we were shy on laughing.
No, not at all, no.
It's like we're there for the laughter, but it's like, give us something to laugh at.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to our final segment, as we say,
Call this a show?
I think for me, it's a production that needed more writing and needed more work to set it in the right time period. If you're going to build something that's set in the time period, do it. And in a way, you've got all the toys in the toy. In a way, you've got all the tools in the toy. You've got all the. You've got.
What have you got in your toolbox?
You've got all the tools in the toolbox
Ooh.
to play with this in a way. And like we said earlier about, over stylizing it and stuff for the 60s and taking it in a complete direction like that. Almost, if anybody's seen the set for Boeing, I'd have seen it, more.
That was more fashionably 60s.
Set in a real 60s moment to create something a bit more memorable than this, because I think that's the issue. I don't think it knew itself where it was set, and the cast can only go on the writing they're given. And yes, there were some moments where I do think the cast certain members needed to, be a bit stronger in performance, but I think overall it just lacked that extra slapstick, that extra element of fun, really. Well, I mean, for me, it should have been more dress up and fun and slapstick and silly, and I just think it lacked that humour element, really.
For me, I really did not enjoy this production at all. I was so looking forward to it. The moment I saw the set, I thought, okay, this isn't exactly thrilling me. And I think from then on, it just ended up coming across as being slightly cheap and amateurish. And I hate to say that word, but it just didn't go there for me. No. I think the whole writing was the issue as well. The jokes were pretty lame, if not there at all. The farce element to this just seemed to drag on. It didn't necessarily have the great farcical elements that were fast and fun at all times. It was a chore, and I think that just sums up how I felt about this second one. It was a disappointment. It was a disappointing viewing experience for me. I think some of the actors tried their very hardest to make it a good show. You could see that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, with the writing and the several different accents going on at the same time, it was what it was. And I don't mean like it was an amateur performance. I just mean the set-wise and stuff. It just looked and felt a little too refined by perhaps the budget. And comparing that to the acting and the Fast for 39 Steps, there's no comparison. And also comparing this to the previous Cluedo set. The previous Cluedo set was amazing. And if I was to compare again, well, I won't compare again, but I'll just say this reminded me of Rebus.
Yeah.
It bored me. It bored me. It's just not for me. But other people may think differently.
Yeah, other people may see differently, but
that is life. Scores then, please, Richard, for Cluedo 2, the next chapter. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a whodunit sequel that held all the clues, and 1 being hit on the head in the library with a boring old script. What's it going to be?
I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10.
Oh.
Straight down the middle.
Okay, so for me, I think I originally said 8 for Cluedo. Originally. Yep. This comes in at a whopping 3.
Wow.
It's just a 3.
It wasn't thrilling.
I wasn't thrilling this. So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
We've not used this, but it's got to be a
Meh. Oh, you giving that, are you? And mine's going to be
meh.
that one.
Oh, you're doing it as well, are you?
I am.
So there we are. That's our discussion of Cluedo 2, the next chapter. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Stay tuned as we bring you more of our thoughts
And opinions.
on many theatrical delights in future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, email us at upstagedownsstagepod@gmail.com. You can always join in the chat to share with us your views of a production.
Also, make sure to follow, share, like and subscribe to all our channels so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of
Upstage Downstage.
Okay, Richard, I am good to go ho whenever you are good to go ho.
Okay, tally ho. What ho?
Is it?
Are we recording?
Yes.
Are we recording now?
I paused it and then I had to.
Are you
press on
receiving
pause.
me?
Receiving you, receiving me.
Cluedo 2, the next chapter, was written by BAFTA Award winners Lawrence Marks and Maurice Green and
No, not Morris Green.
Ran. Cluedo 2, the next chapter, was written by BAFTA Award winners Lawrence Marks and Maurice Grant, and I've just got a pop-up on the screen. It locked it all off. Cluedo 2, the next chapter, was written by BAFTA Award winners Lawrence Marks and Maurice... You fucked me up now. Cluedo 2, the next chapter, was written by... Have you finished? Because it's highlighting mine at the same time.
I'm just going to highlight it and just take out that hit, the first hit, so you don't get
No. I'll get it.
bamboozled.
Cluedo 2, the next chapter...
When you said you got it,
Fuck off.
what bit did you get? Because I haven't got any of
That
it
bit.
yet.
Cluedo 2, the next chapter, was written by BAFTA Award winners... Cluedo... Fuck off.
Cluedo 2, the next chapter, is a rollicking... Cluedo 2, the next chapter, is a rollicking spoof. Yes, spoof of a comedy. Cluedo 2 is a rollicking... Why do I want to say like it's a rollickingly? Do you know what I mean?
Rollickingly spoof of a comedy. Glee.
Cluedo 2 is a spoof of a comedy that will keep you guessing right up to the final twist, inviting budding detectives... Oh, why have I lost it? That felt wrong again.
You didn't say rollicking this time.
No, I know I didn't. I thought I'd
Dropped
just...
it.
Cluedo 2 is a rollicking spoof of a comedy that will keep you guessing right up until, I feel like, no, right up to the final twist, inviting budding detectives of all ages. I feel like it should be. There'll be a breath there. Inviting budding detectives of all ages from 8 to 80 and beyond.
Yeah.
To watch for the clues and unravel the secrets as we all try to work out who done it with
That's
what
better.
and where. And as we all try to work out who done it with what and where and to who. No, I just added that extra little bit. I don't think I've done that right.
Summary.
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 Oh.
Summary.
Oh.
Directed by Mark Bell, who was the original director of the original hit. No, why have I put original in twice then?
Because you're a knob.
And directed by Mark
No wonder
Bell.
these recordings take about 10 days.
Cluedo 2, the next chapter.
In fact, stop right there.